the conflict between Arabs and Jews had existed for a long time, but the immediate reason for the conflict was that the United Nations had decided in 1947, in the fall of 1947, to establish a partition in Palestine, a Jewish area and an Arab area. And the Jewish part of the establishment in Israel accepted that, but the Arab people did not accept it, and all the Arab nations threatened that they would invade the country and start a war if that was done. Nevertheless, a decision was made in the United Nations, and in May of 1948, the Israelis declared a state of Israel. At that moment, and before that, there was a lot of military activity, but after that, Arab nations like Jordan, Egypt, Syria, all declared war. Iraq also on Israel, and Israel at that point had only a population of 500,000 Jewish people with hardly any less weapons. They had a underground organizations called the Haganah, which had worked under the British mandate, but the British did not allow it, so it was an illegal activity. It was very difficult to organize any military resistance. But at the moment of 48, when the law was declared, a lot of people came to Israel, and Israel organized an army. And that war lasted, it was a war of independence for Israel, lasted about a year. My wife had been in the Holocaust, in the war. I had been in Switzerland. I had been in Belsen camp as a doctor. We met there, we got married. And the Haganah had representatives in Switzerland, where we lived, and asked us whether we would volunteer in the army. They needed doctors and nurses. And we knew it was kind of dangerous. The situation didn't look very good because there were 5 nations attacking that small country of the Jewish settlement, but we decided to go. They thought we were crazy, but we went anyway. And after a while we went on to the last ship that was illegal in the eyes of the British to Israel, and joined the army there. We were the first ones to be sent to the front lines of the Haganah. Was transformed into the Israeli army at that point, and they created new divisions, and we were part of the Golani Brigade, which was one of the famous brigades of the Israeli war. That was the reason why we joined. As far as my wife is concerned, she had lost her parents in Auschwitz. She, at that point, really didn't care what happened to her, particularly. I had been a Zionist conviction for a long time. We thought it was the right thing. That made our decision. Well, we stayed there a year. That's as long as the War of Independence lasted. We were sent to the front lines in the north of Israel, near the town of Nazareth, which was a difficult situation because there were a few Jewish settlements up there, and there were irregular armies from Syria, Iraqi troops and Iraqi planes attacking us from the north. We held a position of the road between Nazareth and the Sea of Galilee, which was a very strategic point. We had very few weapons at that point. It was a new army, but in our battalion, for instance, only 1 in 10 soldiers had a gun. And the guns were old Turkish rifles, nothing modern. We had one machine gun that we were fighting on top of an old Turkish farm, attacked on all sides by Arab troops, and we ran from one side to the other using the machine gun, making them feel that maybe we had several, but we didn't. At that point, I was taking care of people who were being injured. A British doctor and I worked together, and unfortunately, a mortar shell went right through the window of the sick room, exploded, killed him, wounded me, and that I was transported by a armored car. The armored cars in Israel at that point were not really armored; they only looked like it. Maybe 1 or 2 plates were actually steel; the rest was cardboard. You know, my wife was working in school further the way down with injured soldiers. They called her down to the road. I was on the stretcher there. And they said, well, your husband is wounded. And they said that first I was dead, but I wasn't quite. But anyway, I was in the hospital for a number of weeks. We joined the army. We had further positions. We actually had an assignment that was very dangerous. We were going to invade the West Bank. But at that moment, that night, the Count Bernadotte, who was the representative of the United Nations in Jerusalem, was assassinated by Jewish terrorists, and the whole operation was called off. That's why the West Bank had been Arab for 22 years.
That's why we're still sitting here.
After a year, my older wife got pregnant. We celebrated my recovery that way. And after a year, we went back to Switzerland. And after a number of months working at the hospital, having the baby and so on, we decided we would come to the United States. Yeah, well, very much so. I'm very unhappy about the course of events in Israel. I think that the years of right-wing governments in Israel have done a lot of damage to it. I feel that the present Prime Minister is definitely doing damage to Israel by his refusal to be serious about having two states declared, thinking in some reason that he can wait, or that God will give him the territory, or some delusion, not looking at the practical realities of the world. So we are very afraid for the fate of Israel at this point. I mean, Israel in some ways is a tremendous success. Industrially, electronically, it's one of the leading nations in the world, despite its size. But politically, unfortunately, I think it's on the wrong track at the moment. Okay, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you said it very well.
My wife agrees with me. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right.